Hey guys, this new training video is all about cabling. More specifically, verifying that the cabling is correct. Some things to note before we get into this. First of all, we're going to provide the example with fixed wireless, but this is applicable for all connection types. Number two, not only is this important to check cabling, but it's so important to make sure your documentation is correct and descriptive. When I say descriptive, I don't just mean that you have all the cables and their labels documented as well as their colors. We want it documented in a way that makes sense. And then number three, this is probably one of the most common steps that fixes the problem when done correctly. So it's very important to do this correctly. So when you're verifying cabling, you're going to walk the customer through finding their equipment and follow the cables to see where they go. You are not going to explain how it needs to be connected and ask the customer to verify that it is correct. Let me explain that again so it really sinks in. You're checking the cabling, so have the customer describe the way it is connected and then see if that's correct. Do not describe the correct connection and expect the customer to verify that that's right. So here's how it sounds in practice. Okay, customer, can you locate the router? Customer will locate the router. Okay, now on the back of the router you should see a port that looks different than the other ports. Do you see that? Customer will confirm. What color is the cable plugged into that port? Customer will tell you the color. They'll document it. Okay, and what is that port labeled? Customer will tell you the label and you'll document it. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and have you follow that cable and tell me where it leads. Customer will say that it leads to a small box. Obviously, if it doesn't lead to the PoE box, you've just figured out their problem. Okay, now that we found that box, which port on that box is the cable plugged into? Customer will tell you the label of the port and you'll document it. Alright, now I need you to check that the other Ethernet cable is plugged into that same box, and what color is that cable? Customer will tell you it's plugged in, tell you the color of the cable, and you'll document it. Okay, what is that port labeled? Customer will tell you where it's labeled, and then, excellent, where does the cable lead? And then you'll document it. Okay? While you're doing this, you're going to document what the customer says, but do it in a way that makes sense to the reader of your notes. So up here, I'm going to write an example of how this should look. So you see, we're on the step that says that we need to check all the connections. So we check the connection, we ask them to locate their router, they'll locate the router. And we'll say, on the back of your router, find the port that's different. What's that labeled? The customer says internet. So we'll say internet port on router. And then you'll ask them, what color is that cable? And they'll say it's blue. It has a blue cable. All right, and then where does that port lead? Customer says, okay, I'm going to follow it. And they follow it, and then it leads to the PoE box. Okay, and then on the PoE box, what port is that plugged into? They have like a traditional Ubiquiti PoE, so it leads into the LAN port. So we're going to say blue cable leads to LAN port on PoE box. Okay, and then from the PoE box, we're going to say, all right, customer, there's another port on there that has an Ethernet cable plugged into. What's that labeled? PoE port on PoE box. And what color is that cable? Oh, it's black. Okay. And then where does that go? Oh, it goes outside. I'm guessing that probably goes to the radio. So I would go in my notes, leads outside, and then I'll go probably to radio. You see how when reading these notes it makes sense? Internet port on router has a blue cable that leads to the LAN port on the PoE box. The PoE port on the PoE box has a black cable that leads outside, probably to the radio. That makes sense. It makes sense to anybody reading the notes, and that's the amount of detail we want on your tickets. Okay, guys? Thanks for tuning in.